Hi everyone, I am Rahul and welcome back to the EKS series. This is the 7th video of the series, and in this video we are going to be learning about EKS Fargate. So what is EKS Fargate? EKS Fargate is a serverless compute that lets us run Kubernetes applications which are deployed as pods on EKS without having to provision, configure or manage the underlying EC2 compute instances, which obviously work as worker nodes in an EKS cluster. So AWS manages all the operational tasks for the worker nodes such as provisioning, scaling, patching and security. So if you have seen the previous video where we learned about AWS managed node groups, you'll understand that we are the one who are responsible for managing the worker nodes which are deployed as the managed nodes. But in case of EKS Fargate, that task is done by AWS itself. And in case of EKS Fargate, each pod gets its own isolated virtual machine, no shared kernel with others. So here's the basic difference between a node group and an EKS Fargate. In case of a node group, we have a node, which is obviously an EC2 instance, and whenever we deployed our applications as pods, those pods get scheduled inside those EC2 instances, and they all share the same kernel and also the same networking. But in case of EKS Fargate, the structure is a bit different, because here every pod is deployed as a different node on the cluster. So if you deploy a pod, it will spin up a new EC2 instance, and then that pod will run inside that EC2 instance, because of which there is no shared kernel with others. So let's see how it works. So what we need to do is we just need to create a Fargate profile that specifies the namespace and labels. So what is a Fargate profile? Well, we'll see that in the latter part of the video. It's just a way of telling the EKS cluster that what pods we want to run on EKS Fargate. So whenever a pod is scheduled with that Fargate profile that we created here, EKS control plane schedules it, and then Fargate automatically provisions a new EC2 instances for the pod with the compute specified in the pod manifest, just the way we saw it here. Okay, so here's an example of a Fargate profile. You just create a Fargate profile and you specify the namespace as well as the labels. And now what we are seeing Kubernetes is that any pod which is deployed in the prod namespace, which is defined here, and has labels color is equals to red, should be deployed to Fargate nodes and not AWS managed nodes. So that's pretty much about it. Now what we'll do is we'll just spin up our EKS cluster, and then we'll do all those things on that cluster to see how it works. So I already have an EKS cluster running here which I deployed using AWS CloudFormation. And if you don't know how to do that, I recommend you to go and watch the second video of the series where I've explained how to create an EKS cluster. Alright, so I have this cluster running here which is called prod, and I also have an EC2 instance running here which contains the kubectl, EKSETL and the help installed inside it. And this was also created using CloudFormation template. So what I'll do is I'll just click on connect, and I'll be connecting using AWS Systems Manager, which is a secure way of connecting to the EC2 instances, unlike the SSH where we have to open a port. Now I'll switch to sudo. And if you have seen the videos or the previous videos, you need to know that we need to add an entry in the kubeconfig file before we can connect to the cluster. So what I'll do is I'll just run the command AWS EKS update kubeconfig. My region is AP South 1 and the name of the cluster is prod. Alright, it's done, and it says the entry has been added in the kubeconfig file. Now I'll just add an alias here, and I'll just run a simple command to check whether we have connected to the cluster or not. So as you can see, these are the two nodes which are currently running on my EKS cluster. So now what we'll do is we'll create a Fargate profile, we'll create an IAM role that will be used by the Fargate pods, and then we'll deploy a simple application to see how Fargate works. So I have this GitHub repository here which is created for this course. I'll open this folder called Fargate. For this file here called enable fargate.md, and let's start and follow the instructions which are mentioned here. First of all, we need to create a role called AWS Fargate profile pod execution role. So just copy it, head over to your AWS console, and I'll go to IAM. go to roles here and click on create role. Just see the instructions which is mentioned here. For the trust relationship, use AWS service EKS and EKS Fargate pod. So that's exactly what I'll do. I'll select trusted entity type as AWS service. Here I'll select EKS, and here I'll select EKS Fargate pod as specified here. Alright. So once this part is done, what I'll do is I'll just click on next. We'll click on next. We'll give it a role, and then we'll just click on create role. Alright, so the role is created. I'll click on view role. So this is the role which is created for us. Now what I'll do is I'll just add permissions here. Click on add permissions, click on attach policies, and you'll see a policy name which is already created by AWS for us, so we don't have to work on this part. So I'll just copy this policy name, paste it here, select this policy and click on add permissions. Alright, so the permission is attached to our role, and here is the trust relationship of our role. Let's see what we need to do next. Now what we need to do is we need to create a Fargate profile. So how do we do that? Well, go to your EKS cluster, go to this tab called compute, scroll to the bottom and you will see a section called Fargate profiles. Right now I don't have any Fargate profile here. I'll click on add Fargate profile. I'll give it a name prod Fargate profile, and the role is already selected for us. This is the role that we just created. For the subnets, I'll select the private subnets of my EKS cluster. These subnets are also created as a part of CloudFormation template. So I'll click on next. For the namespace, if you saw the previous documentation, we need to provide a namespace here. So for this namespace, I'll select prod, and for the labels, I'll select environment prod. Alright. Namespace is gonna be prod, and match labels. I'll add a label called env, and this is also gonna be prod. I'll click on next. Just verify the settings that you made and click on create. Alright, it will take some time for this Fargate profile to be in active state. Till then, what we'll do is we'll just head over to our EKS cluster and we'll create a namespace called prod. And how do we do that? Just write kubectl create namespace prod. Alright, so this namespace is created. Alright, so my Fargate profile is created and its status is active now. Let's see what we need to do next. Now if you see this line right here, it says now all the pods that are created in the mentioned namespace, which is going to be prod in our case, and with the selected labels will run on Fargate. So we need to just add this label called environment is equals to prod to our deployment or the pods, and then they will be picked by Fargate. So let's create a deployment with that defined configuration here. So I'll just copy it, and if you see here the namespace is prod, which is obviously specified in our Fargate profile, and along with that, if you see the labels of the pod, it has this label called environment is equals to prod. So it just satisfies this condition which we have defined in our Fargate profile. So I'll just go to my kubectl terminal and I'll create a file called deployment.yaml. I'll paste it here. Now I'll apply this file. Alright, so it says the deployment is created. Let's see, kubectl get pods. Right now there are no pods, and it's because I need to specify the namespace name, which is prod. And you will see there are 3 pods which are in pending state, and the reason they're in pending state is because Fargate has a little warm up time, or like the cold start, because of which it takes some time for the Fargate to spin up new nodes, and then it schedules these pods on those nodes. So I'll just run this command again. Alright, they're still in the pending state. I'll just run this command with -w, which stands for watch. And now you'll see that one of the pods is in container creating state. We have another one here in the container creating state. Meanwhile, you can just check the number of nodes here. So previously when we checked the number of nodes, there were 2 nodes and those were from my managed node groups. Now if I run this command, you'll see that I have 3 new nodes spun up here and they just started like just a few seconds ago, which means the Fargate just spin up a new EC2 instances for worker nodes and then it scheduled those pods here. So I'll just write again kubectl get pods -and prod, and you will see this that 3 of my pods are now in running state. So this is how AWS Fargate works. There's nothing much you can do about it because it is managed by AWS, so you just cannot SSH into the instances, and apart from this you won't be able to see those instances in your terminal as well. So if I go to my EC2 dashboard and I refresh this page, you will see that I don't have any EC2 instances mentioned here which belong to the Fargate, because that is managed by AWS completely. You can't even see that on your EC2 console. Alright, let's see what we can do next with the Fargate. Now what we'll do is we'll just enable logging. And how do we enable logging? You just need to create a namespace called AWS observability, and this is a mandatory condition. It's not like you can just name it anything, because this is what is being defined in the configuration. So I'll just create this using this file here. I'll create vim namespace.yaml. I'll paste it here. I'll exit out of here and I'll apply this file. Alright, so my namespace AWS observability has been created. Let's see what we need to do next. We need to create a log group. Alright, it's mandatory to create this log group because that is where the logs are gonna get published from your EKS nodes or the Fargate pods. So I'll just head over to my console. I'll go to CloudWatch. I'll create a new log group here. Click on create log group and I'll name it Fargate logs. The retention period I'll keep it as 1 day because this is for testing purpose, and I'll just click on create. Alright, so my Fargate log group is created. Now what we need to do is we need to create this config map. Alright, so just copy it, and before copying it and pasting it in the terminal, just make sure you need to make sure you change a few values here, and one of them is the region. So if you see, we have to specify the region where our EKS cluster is running, and along with that we need to specify the log group name which I just created. So I'll just head over to my kubectl terminal. I'll create a new file called configmap.yaml. I'll paste it here, and now I'll change the region. I'll keep it AP South 1 because that's where my cluster is running right now. And for the log group, I'll give the log group that I created recently, which is called Fargate logs. Alright, looks good to me. I'll just exit out of here. This part is done. Now what we need to do is we need to add permissions to the role. So if you remember, we created a role earlier which is called pod execution role, which will be used by Fargate. Now we need to add necessary permissions to that role so that it can publish logs to the log group. So what we'll do is we'll just download this policy using curl command. Alright, it's downloaded and it's called permission.json. Now I'll just create a policy from this file. Alright, so the policy is created, and now we will add this policy to our role, and the role is already specified here. It's called Amazon EKS Fargate pod execution role. I'll paste it here, and before pressing enter, what I'll do is I'll just modify the policy here because we need to specify the policy ARN, and the policy ARN in my case is this right here. Alright, looks good to me. I'll press enter and it is attached to our role. Now what we need to do is, I think that's pretty much it about it. What you need to do is just create a deployment or just restart your deployment. So if I see my deployment, I have this deployment running in the prod namespace. What I'll do is I'll just restart kubectl rollout, restart deployment, my app, and the namespace is prod. Alright, so the pods are restarted. Let's verify it using kubectl pods -prod. Okay, so some of them are pending and they just recently started. We'll wait for the few minutes. For the pods to be on a running state. You can see these pods that they are running, they're all the old pods, the one which we are running before the restart. Let me clear the terminal, run this command again, and one of the pod is in container creating state now. Alright, so one of the pod has started running already and the other pod is spinning up. Meanwhile, as the pod has started running, it will start to send logs to the log group. So I'll just go to my CloudWatch log groups, click on Fargate logs. Right now there are no log streams here, which none of the log has been published. But you will see pods, the logs here, the moment all of your pods start. Alright, so yeah, I think that was all for this video. Like Fargate, it's not that tough, and most of the things are managed by AWS, so we do not have to manage or configure a lot of things here. So if you find this video useful, please share it with other people so they can benefit from it, and please subscribe to the channel for more upcoming content. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, tata, bye bye.